Hey everyone, so welcome back. Like I said, we'll go straight into it. So in the last video, we spoke a bit about, just bear with me a sec. Yeah, so in the last video, we spoke about three questions that I needed you to be able to answer, and I want you to reflect on, which I call the Thinking Coach framework. Today, I just want to speak, in this video, I want to speak about standard. And that's a abbreviation, and I'm going to address and tell you what I mean by each of those words. And they're essentially 8 dimensions of what I think is elite coaching practice. Things that real principles that you need to think about and that I think you can apply for greater coaching for yourself. And it's really about reflecting on what you consider to be elite coaching. So there's 8. I'll probably talk a little bit more about some, and those that I don't talk a lot about, I want you to reflect on them in your own time. So the first stop is letter S. S stands for standard. So I spoke about standards in the Thinking Coach framework. So again, standards crops up here because standards are really important. And I think a lot of coaches fall short. You see, everyone in sports wants to win. It's just everyone wants to win. But the reality is not everyone wins and not everyone is a winner. And the reason why not everyone wins and not everyone is a winner is because a lot of people don't have standards. A lot of people in sports don't really have standards. For example, what does elite coaching look like to you? Is the first question I would ask. A lot of coaches don't even ask themselves that question. What does elite coaching practice look like to you? And what do you expect from a player that you think is an elite player or you think should be an elite player? What do you expect? And I think it's important to think about that on an individual basis and what are your own standards of elite coaching practice. Here's the thing. Coaching and the principles of winning in sport are the same, regardless of what level you are, regardless of what environment you are. And one of the things I've seen and observed in the coaches that I've had the opportunity to mentor, coaches that have passed through our program, is that when they've gone, they've left their home and natural environment, which isn't necessarily the best of environments and starts, because the reality is, in some countries, everybody complains about funding and infrastructure wherever you go. But in reality, it's worse in some places than it is in others. But here's the thing. By developing your own personal standards and knowing what your standards for elite coaching is, you kind of automatically put yourself above the limitations of your environment, whatever environment that may be, whatever you may be doing. Because the key principles of sports are universal concepts. Wherever you are, it applies. So if you have a personal standard of elite coaching, which is not based on the infrastructure around you, which is not based on the environment that you are in, it's not based on funding, it's just based on your own standards of what you think elite coaching practice would be, then that's what will stay with you wherever you go. And guess what? You become confident in practicing, you become confident as a coach, whatever environment you're thrown into, because you are guided by your standards, not by the environment that you find yourself in. So what's defining you now as a coach and as an elite coach is those standards that you've set for yourself. So really important to think of it in what you're doing, both as at a foundational level, and also if you're an elite coach, I would challenge you to ask you, what are your standards? Why do you consider yourself an elite coach? It doesn't matter if you've won 1 or 2 trophies. That alone is not enough. We're talking about long-term cultures, long-term legacies, and it has to go deeper than you winning the odd trophy, because winning a trophy, yes, that can be dependent on the environment you're in. If everyone in your environment is not that great, it becomes easy to win. But when you're pushed into another environment where you have greater people, I believe that what would enable you to thrive in such an environment, what would enable you to stand firm and to show and still be able to compete and still be able to maintain a certain level of delivery and outcome is your standards. So really important to think about that. T is for teaching. What do I mean by teaching? It's how do you develop people, not just systems. So oftentimes, I think that oftentimes people think about systems, and if you're running a program, it's really important that you have strong systems in place because you need good systems to stand the test of time. But what's more important is that those systems are useless if you haven't got people around you to make the system work. And so you need to think as well about how you're developing people in your team and your setup, not just your coaches, not just the athletes, but other people around you, other people in your setup. One of the things that I do, and I guess in a way it keeps me up at night, is I'm constantly thinking about the people that I work closely with. Every decision I make, everything I'm trying to do, I'm always thinking, how can I make sure that everyone around me benefits from this? How can I make sure that people key into it? Because I know that with all the systems in the world, if I don't have the right people, because I know what it is to work with people that are not great, are not committed, or have attitudes, or are just plain mean, I know the difference. And ultimately, the greatness of whatever program, whatever you do, is going to be based on the people that you put into that system you create. So if you have a bad system, it's not going to work. If you have a good system, but you don't have the right people, it's not going to work. You need to have a good system, and then you fit in the right people into that system, and that's when the magic happens. A stands for accountability. Who owns when the pressure, when the pressure hits. So we spoke a bit about accountability in the last video. I spoke about that in the last video. So I'm not going to speak too much about that now. But what I do want to speak about, touch on, is the narrative. What story do you tell when you lose a game or when you win a game? Because every game, every competition involves a story for yourself, a story for the athlete. How do you tell that story? How do you reflect on that story? And here's what I mean. I've seen a lot of coaches over the years that also blame referees and officials for their losses and their failures. And I've never really been a believer in that. And I've seen players do the same. And, I've watched games, and even now when I watch, and I can see, yes, sometimes the referees, the officials don't make the right calls. And I think also from working more closely with officials and referees and understanding how they function and some of their challenges. But that aside, your loss and your win, you cannot blame referees and officials. And you're right, sometimes key decisions favor other teams, are favored. We see it even especially in international sports. Sometimes bigger teams, so-called bigger teams, seem to get calls that go their way more than the others. But ultimately, and this is where your standards comes into play as well. Play to your standards. Don't allow the decisions other people make to control your own narrative and your results. Yeah, you had a bad call. Get on with it. I mean, there's a popular saying, I abide by this. I believe in this. When people show you who they are, take it and leave. So if you have a referee that you feel is not making calls in your favor, the referee has shown you what they're about. So you need to evolve and change your strategy to deal with the challenge that you have in front of you. There's a limit to bad calls. There's a limit to the impact bad calls can have. And so you still have a control over whether you let that determine the outcome of your game or not. And when you win, who do you acknowledge just one person in the team? Or do you highlight even the person doing the little things, the person doing the hustling, etc.? What's the story that you create? That narrative is really important, because that narrative is what's going to inspire all of your players, not just one player. You need all of your players to bring their 100%, whatever their 100% is in a team game or in a team sport, and even in an individual sport. You need everyone in your setup to bring 100%, if not 110% of what they have to the table. And the narrative you tell when you win, when you lose, is what will help to inspire those people. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I know just hearing narrative, it probably doesn't go deep, but maybe now that I've said it and added a bit of context, it makes sense. Decision making. Again, we talked a little bit about decision making from the player's perspective, the team's perspective. So I'm not going to dwell on that. adaptability, being able to adapt and evolve. So there are certain things in your program, in your team, in your setup that should remain fixed, that there shouldn't be any compromise over. I would say your standards are things that should be fixed. The culture and what your setup is based on, your vision, shouldn't be compromised. But there are other things, like some of the processes can be tweaked a little bit as to how you achieve your goals. Some of the logistics, all those type of things are adaptable. Are adaptable things that are important as far as elite coaching goes, but they can be adapted. So, for example, when I said environment, you may be in an environment that is definitely not what you would consider an elite coaching environment, and you don't have access to great facilities, etc. Those type of things are adaptable. You can adapt your drills to deal with the environment you're in. You can adapt, the processes, the way you do things. In fact, that being able to adapt in that fashion, it can actually become a skill that, actually becomes a skill that you are able to set yourself apart. And when you are in an environment where you have a lot of those things, it becomes even a greater asset to you. So those type of things are things that are adaptable, but what shouldn't be adaptable, like I said, are your standards, your principles, and all those type of things. And then relationships, I talk a lot more about that in some of the other stuff that I've done. So I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel and talk too much about that, but it has to be a standard that you consider deeply when it comes to elite coaching. The one that I want to leave you with is development. Okay, what do I mean by development? And the question I want you to ask yourself is, who are you becoming as a coach? So who you want to be as a coach is one question, but who you're becoming is what will enable you to be who you want to be as a coach. So the process is as important as the destination, and you need to think about your own development, what you're doing, etc., in order to become that coach that you want to become. So I just want to leave it there, but I want to give you a small assignment, and I want you to picture me with you this week as you go into training, as you go into games or competition. Picture me watching you and ask yourself the question, if I was to watch you for the next 7 days, what would I learn about your standards, and what would I learn about you as a coach? I'd really love for you to share that with me as well as feedback. But even if you don't share it with me, just picture you have me in the room with you. I do try to watch coaches when I'm, the coaches I mentor, when I get the opportunity so I can advise them. But obviously, I can't do that all the time, and I can't do that right now. So I want you to do it for me by imagining that I'm there with you over the next week, and then let me know how things went and what that did to you. So I'm going to end this video now, and when we come back, we'll talk about the final framework that I have before we close off this particular episode, or this series that I'm doing on this episode. So bye for now, and I shall see you next